Clara had always loved the quiet meadow behind her family's small cabin. It was the one place where she could escape the noise of chores, the arguing of neighbors, and the heavy fear that hung over frontier life every morning. When the sun was soft and the sky was still pale, she carried a small woven basket and walked down the narrow dirt path toward the field of wildflowers. Her mother often said she was wasting time, but Clara felt that the meadow held something peaceful that she needed. It was the only place where she felt she could breathe. The grass brushed gently against her dress as she stepped into the open clearing. Yellow petals swayed in the breeze, purple blossoms nodded toward her, and the warm scent of earth filled the air. She knelt to gather the first cluster of yellow flowers, smiling at how bright they looked. Her fingers moved slowly, almost tenderly, as if she were greeting old friends. The world felt soft here. The wind hummed instead of howled. The birds sang instead of warning. For a few minutes, Clara forgot everything else. But that morning something felt different. She did not know why, but the silence felt heavier. She paused, flowers in hand, and glanced over her shoulder. Nothing moved except the tall grass swaying like waves. Still, she felt something watching her. A presence she could not name. Clara straightened up. Brushing dirt from her hands, she turned slowly. Her eyes scanning the tree line, the sun slipped behind a cloud. Dimming the golden glow of the field, her heartbeat quickened even though she saw nothing. She took a step toward her basket to continue picking flowers. But a soft thump echoed from the edge of the meadow. It was faint, like a hoof settling into soil. Clara froze. Another sound followed, a quiet breath of air that did not belong to the wind. When she finally lifted her eyes, she saw him. A tall Comanche warrior sat on a painted horse just beyond the tree line. He was not moving, not speaking, only watching her with dark, unreadable eyes. His hair fell in long braids, and the feathers tied to them trembled in the wind. His chest was marked with symbols Clara did not understand. A spear rested across his saddle, steady and ready. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had heard stories all her life, stories full of warning and fear. But nothing prepared her for the quiet power of the man staring at her now. He did not look angry. He did not look cruel. He looked like someone who carried a world on his shoulders. She took one shaky step back. Clutching her basket to her chest, the warrior did not move. His horse shifted its weight gently, but he remained still as stone. For a moment they stood like that. Two strangers connected by nothing but silence and the soft wind between them. Clara felt her heart pounding against her ribs. She wanted to run, but her feet stayed planted. Something in his expression made her pause. It was not hatred. It was not threat. It was something deeper, something she could not name. "Do you want me to leave?" she whispered, even though she knew he could not hear her from that distance. The warrior's eyes narrowed slightly. As if he understood anyway, he lifted his chin. A small gesture that carried surprising weight. Clara swallowed hard. Her hands trembled as she set her basket down on the ground. She stepped backward slowly, her gaze never leaving his. As she reached the edge of the clearing, she turned and hurried toward the trees, but she kept glancing back. Unable to shake the feeling that this moment meant more than she understood, halfway down the path, she stopped. A strange mix of fear and curiosity pulled at her. She looked back one last time. The warrior was still there, still watching. The wind pushed through the grass, lifting flower petals into the air like tiny yellow butterflies. Clara felt something shift inside her, something she could not explain. She turned away and hurried home. Her mind raced with questions. Why had he been there? Why had he watched her? And why did she feel that her life had changed in the moment their eyes met? Clara did not know the answers, but deep inside, she sensed one truth. The meadow she loved would never be the same again. Clara could not stop thinking about the warrior she had seen in the meadow. All night she tossed in her small wooden bed, listening to the creaking of the cabin and the distant cry of coyotes. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man's still face and the steady way he watched her. Fear sat heavy in her chest, but something else kept pushing through it. A strange sense that his eyes had tried to tell her something. In the morning, her mother noticed her trembling hands as she poured water into the tin cups. "Are you ill?" her mother asked. Frowning at her pale face, Clara shook her head quickly. "Just tired," she whispered, though her voice betrayed her. Her father barely glanced up from sharpening his knife. "Stay close today," he muttered. "There have been tracks near the creek." Clara nodded. But her mind was already drifting toward the meadow. She did not want to go back. And yet she felt drawn there, as if the place held answers she needed. By midday, she could no longer stand the heaviness in her chest. She picked up her basket and told her mother she would gather herbs behind the cabin. Her mother waved her off, too busy kneading bread to question her. Clara walked quietly along the familiar path. The sunlight filtered through the trees in thin golden lines. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears as she reached the edge of the meadow. The flowers swayed gently as if welcoming her back. But she did not step into the open field. She stayed near the trees. Scanning the far side where she had seen him for several long minutes, nothing moved. Then a soft rustle broke the silence. Clara stiffened. A horse stepped out from behind the tall grass, and the same Comanche warrior rode into view. But this time, he came closer. Stopping only a short distance from her, Clara's breath caught. The warrior raised a hand, not to frighten her, but to tell her not to run. His movements were calm, almost gentle. He dismounted slowly and stepped toward her with a quiet authority that made the air feel heavier. Clara wanted to back away, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. "What? What do you want?" she whispered, her voice shaking. The man studied her for a long moment before speaking. His voice was deep and steady, carrying the low hum of someone used to command. "You should not come here," he said. His English rough but clear. Clara frowned in confusion. "This meadow is dangerous for your people," he added. Clara blinked, trying to understand. "No one comes here except me," she said softly. The warrior shook his head. "There are others," he replied. "Men who do not follow my rules." A chill ran through Clara's body. He stepped closer, but not in a threatening way. He seemed careful with every movement, as if afraid she might panic. "My name is Tarako," he said, touching his chest. Then he pointed gently toward her, waiting. "Clara," she answered with a trembling breath. Tarako nodded. "Clara," he repeated, as if weighing the sound of her name. "You must not come here again," he said firmly. She swallowed hard. "But why?" she asked. "Why warn me?" Tarako's eyes shifted toward the ridge above the meadow. "Because danger walks near this place," he said quietly. "Not from my people," he added before she could ask. "But from others who take what is not theirs?" Clara's stomach tightened. She had heard stories of raids of men who traveled in small groups, stealing horses, food, and sometimes people. She hugged her arms around herself. "Why warn me?" she whispered again. Tarako studied her face with an expression she could not read. "You were alone," he said simply. "And alone is unsafe." The wind swept through the grass. Carrying his words like a whisper, Clara looked down at the basket in her hands, suddenly feeling foolish for thinking this place was untouched by danger. "I didn't know," she murmured. "I know," Tarako answered. His voice softer now. He stepped back, placing one hand on his horse's mane. "You go home," he said. Clara nodded slowly. She took one step back, then another, her eyes never leaving his. Tarako watched her with a look that felt like warning and protection mixed together. When she finally turned and walked toward the trees, her heart felt heavier, but strangely steadier. Something told her this man did not mean harm. Something told her he carried a truth she had yet to understand. Clara reached the edge of the forest and looked back one last time. Tarako sat on his horse again, silent and strong, watching her leave. She felt a strange pull inside her chest, a connection she could not explain. She walked home with his voice echoing through her mind. "You must not come here again." But Clara already knew she would return, not out of disobedience, but because her destiny had started to shift the moment he spoke her name. The next few days felt strange for Clara. She tried to keep herself busy with chores, sweeping the cabin floor, feeding the chickens, and helping her mother mend clothes. But no matter how hard she worked, her mind kept drifting back to the meadow and the warrior named Tarako. His warning echoed in her thoughts every time she stepped outside. "You must not come here again." She tried to convince herself she would listen. But the more she thought about his serious eyes and the weight in his voice, the more unsettled she felt. It was not fear alone. It was a sense that something was coming. Something she could not see yet. Her father noticed her quiet mood. One evening, he set down his knife and stared at her with weary eyes. "You've been jumpy," he said, rubbing his temples. "Is something bothering you?" Clara hesitated, knowing she could not tell him about Terrico. Her father held strong fear toward the Comanche, like most settlers did. "I just heard strange noises in the woods," she answered softly. Her father sighed and nodded. "These lands aren't safe," he murmured. "We all know that." At night, Clara stood outside and watched the sky. The stars flickered like tiny fires. Cold and distant, the wind carried a dry, uneasy smell that made her stomach tighten. She felt it again, that silent warning she couldn't explain. Something was wrong. In the morning, distant shouts tore through the air. Clara rushed outside with her parents. People ran between cabins, pointing toward the ridge beyond the valley. Dark smoke curled into the sky like a black serpent rising over the trees. The valley she loved, the one she had always thought of as peaceful and untouched, was burning. Clara's breath caught. Her basket slipped from her fingers and fell into the dirt. Her father cursed under his breath. "Raiders," he growled, grabbing his rifle. Her mother pulled Clara back toward the cabin, fear shaking her hands. "Stay inside," she whispered. Though her voice trembled too much to sound sure, Clara stared at the rising smoke. Her heart pounded with a mixture of terror and something deeper. This was what Terrico had tried to warn her about. He had seen danger long before she did. He had known something she couldn't know, something she couldn't see. Voices grew louder outside as men prepared to defend the settlement. Clara could hear the panic in their words. "They're getting closer," someone shouted. "They hit 2 cabins near the creek," yelled another. Clara's mother shut the door and pushed a wooden beam across it, but her hands shook violently. Clara reached out and held her mother's arm, trying to steady her, but even her own knees felt weak. For hours, the settlement remained tense. Every sound outside made Clara jump. Every crack of dry wood or distant cry made her heart slam against her ribs. She sat by the window, watching the sky grow darker with smoke. Her mind raced back to Terrico's warning. Why had he cared enough to warn her? Why her, out of everyone? By afternoon, the smoke had spread so far that the sun turned red behind it. Shadows stretched across the land in eerie shapes. Clara felt like the world she had known was becoming something else, something harsher, something fragile. The meadow she loved had been swallowed by flames. The flowers, the quiet, the peaceful, turned to ashes. Then a pounding knock echoed at the door. Clara and her mother jumped. Her father raised his rifle, but a neighbor's voice called out, "It's done," he said, breathing heavily. They moved on. For now, Clara stepped outside, her legs shaking. She scanned the horizon, looking for any signs of movement. But the only thing she saw was smoke drifting from the valley like a dying breath. The meadow was gone. The place she felt safe, the place she had grown up loving, had been burned by strangers who cared nothing for beauty or peace. Her father joined the other men to examine the damage. Clara stayed at the edge of the settlement, staring toward the blackened land. She felt grief, but she also felt something new growing beneath it. Strange pull, a strange certainty. Terrico had known this would happen. He had tried to warn her. He had not been her enemy. He had been trying to protect her as the wind carried the last faint smell of smoke across the ridge. Clara whispered to herself, "Why do I feel like this isn't the end?" Her heart beat with an uneasy rhythm. She sensed that the path ahead was already written. The burning valley was not the end of her connection to Terrico. It was only the beginning. The night after the valley burned felt heavier than any Clara had lived through. The settlement stayed awake long after the moon rose. Families huddled together, men gripping rifles, mothers whispering prayers into the cold air. Clara tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw flames eating through the meadow she once loved. And behind those flames, she saw Terrico's face, calm, steady, and shadowed with a warning she had not understood in time. Near dawn, a strange stillness settled over the land. Clara stepped outside to fetch water, hoping the fresh morning air might ease the tightness in her chest. The sky was pale and washed out, the kind of morning that made everything feel fragile. she knelt by the water barrel, cupping the cold water between her hands. But before she could lift it to her lips, she heard something deeper in the forest. A sound she had never heard before but instantly feared. Hoofbeats fast, wild, coming closer. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She dropped the water and ran toward the cabin, shouting for her father. He burst out of the door with his rifle raised, his jaw clenched. Clara's mother pulled her close, holding her so tightly it almost hurt. Voices erupted in the settlement as people rushed to hide or defend themselves. Clara heard screams, metal clashing, horses snorting, and the sickening crack of gunfire before she could understand what was happening. A group of riders swept into view, faces painted, weapons flashing in the dim morning light. Clara's mother tried to drag her inside, but someone grabbed Clara's arm and yanked her backward. She screamed, twisting, trying to break free. Her father roared her name, firing his rifle, but the rider who held her was fast, pulling her up onto the horse before anyone could stop him. Clara's world blurred as the horse charged out of the settlement. Her hair whipped across her face, her eyes stung from the wind. She kicked, clawed, and fought, but the rider held her tight. Terror swallowed her whole. She thought of her mother's terrified eyes, her father's desperate shout, the smoke still lingering from the valley's ashes. But then something unexpected happened. A second rider surged forward, cutting through the chaos like a storm wind. He reached the man holding Clara and slammed his horse into him, forcing both animals to stumble. Clara screamed again, certain they would all crash. The second rider grabbed her around the waist and pulled her onto his own horse with a swift, powerful motion. She knew that touch. She knew that stillness when she looked up. Breath breaking in her throat, she saw him, Tarako. His eyes were sharp, burning with urgency. He did not speak, only held her steady as his horse spun and bolted away from the fighting. Clara clung to him as the wind tore past them. Fear still pounded in her blood. But something else pushed through it: confusion, disbelief, relief. She did not understand. Looked back once and saw more riders closing in, some chasing, some scattering. The settlement shrinking behind them. Smoke rose again from another broken cabin. Clara's heart twisted at the sight. Was she being taken or rescued? She did not know. Tarako guided his horse toward the trees, weaving between the trunks with practiced skill. Clara's mind raced with questions she couldn't form. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Why? Why are you taking me?" Tarako did not answer at first, his focus on the path ahead. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, but heavy with something sharp. "They would have hurt you," he said. "You do not go back there now." Clara felt her stomach twist. She had always feared being taken. But Tarako had pulled her away from the very men who grabbed her. Was she safer with him? She couldn't be certain. But she felt no threat in the way he held her, no cruelty in his grip after a long and breathless ride. Tarako slowed the horse near a narrow ravine hidden between tall cliffs. He dismounted first, then helped her down with careful hands. Clara's legs wobbled beneath her, and he steadied her without a word. She stepped back, breathing unevenly. Her hair tangled, her dress torn, her body trembling, yet his eyes stayed calm, watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Why did you save me?" she whispered. Tarako looked toward the forest, listening for danger before turning back to her. "You are not ours," he said softly, "but you are not theirs either." Clara frowned, not understanding. "You stay here," he added, pointing deeper into the ravine. "Safe, but my family," she cried. Tarako's expression tightened. "I know," he answered, "but you cannot go back now." Clara's breath shook, fear pressed against her ribs. But something inside whispered that Tarako was not her enemy. He had risked himself to save her. He had pulled her from those who meant harm. He had chosen her safety, even if she did not understand why. As Tarako stepped into the shadows to scout the area, Clara hugged her arms around herself and stared at the forest she thought she knew. Her world had broken apart in one morning, and the only hand that had reached for her belonged to the very man she had been raised to fear. Was she taken, or was she saved? She no longer knew, but one truth settled deep inside her. Tarako had been the only one who looked at her as if her life mattered. Clara woke in a place she did not recognize. Soft morning light filtered through the branches above her, painting shifting shadows across the rocks. For a moment she felt lost, drifting somewhere between fear and confusion, then memory surged back the raid. The shouting, the rough hands pulling her away, and then Tarako's strong grip pulling her to safety. No. Her heart tightened as she pushed herself up from the blanket someone had placed beneath her. She looked around carefully. Tarako was nearby. Kneeling by a small fire, as he sharpened a blade with quiet focus, he moved with the stillness of someone who understood danger well enough to respect silence. The sight of him brought a strange comfort and an uneasiness she could not explain. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, unsure if she should speak. Tariko lifted his eyes before she could decide. "You wake," he said calmly. Clara nodded, her voice stuck somewhere in her throat. She expected him to question her or command her, but instead he stood and offered her a small piece of dried meat. "You eat," he added simply. Clara hesitated. Accepting food felt like accepting her situation, but hunger gnawed at her after the long night, so she took it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but sincere. Tarako nodded lightly and returned to tending the fire. They sat in silence for a while, birds chirped above them, unaware of the turmoil that had shattered Clara's world. The crackling fire filled the spaces between them, gentle but uncertain. Clara glanced at Tarako, searching for answers in the calm lines of his face. "Why bring me here?" she finally asked, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Tarako rested his hands on his knees. "You were in danger," he said. "Those men were not mine." Clara swallowed, remembering the rough hands and the fear in her chest. "Who were they?" she asked. "Outlaws," Tarako replied. "Men without honor." His tone darkened slightly, and she felt the weight of his anger. "But you came from me," Clara said quietly. Tarako looked at her, his gaze steady. "I saw them take you," he answered. "I could not leave you." Clara felt something shift inside her, a warm ache spreading through her chest. No one outside her family had ever spoken with such certainty about her safety, but the fear in her heart lingered. "What about my family?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Are they safe?" Tarako's expression softened, but not with reassurance. "I do not know," he answered gently. Clara's breath trembled, tears stung her eyes, but she forced herself to blink them away. Tarako watched her carefully, not unkindly. "You cannot return yet," he added. Clara stared at him, feeling her heart twist. "Why?" she said. "I need to see them." Tarako shook his head once, slow and firm. "Your home is watched," he said. "Not by my people." Clara pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to steady her breathing. "So I'm stuck here," she whispered. "For now," Tarako said, "safe here." The word safe felt heavy and strange as it settled into her thoughts. She'd never imagined safety could come from a man her people called an enemy. Later that morning, Tarako led her to the edge of the ravine. From there she could see rolling hills, tall grass rustling in the breeze, and far beyond, smoke fading into the sky. Clara's heart sank as she imagined what her family must be feeling. "They think I'm gone," she whispered. Tarako stood beside her, a solid presence. "They will hope," he said softly. "Hope is a strong thing." Clara did not answer. Instead, she watched the distant horizon, wondering how a place that looked so calm could hold so much pain. Tarako stepped back and motioned for her to follow. "I take you to my people," he said. Clara's breath caught. "To your camp," she repeated. "Unsure, yes," he said. "You stay with them?" Fear returned to her chest. She had heard stories, terrifying ones, yet something told her Tarako would not harm her or allow harm to come to her. She followed him as he guided his horse along a narrow path. When he helped her mount, his hands were careful, steady, almost gentle. They traveled quietly. Hours passed as trees thinned and the land opened into a broad plain. In the distance, Clara saw smoke rising from small cooking fires and the shapes of lodges built from hides and wooden poles. Children ran between the tents. Women worked near the fires, and men tended to horses in the open field. Tarako's people. Clara felt her breath slow as they approached. Dozens of eyes turned toward them, curious. Cautious, uncertain, some people whispered. Others stared. Clara felt every gaze like a weight on her shoulders. She stepped down from the horse. Clutching her hands together, Tariko stayed beside her. His presence steady and protective, she is guessed, he said firmly to those who approached. Under my guard, the tone of his voice left no room for question. Clara's fear eased a little, not disappeared, but softened around the edges. As she followed Tariko into the village, she felt a fragile, trembling truth settle inside her. She was in a world she did not understand, but she was not alone, and somehow that gave her a small sense of peace, however fragile it might be. Clara had been in the Comanche camp for several days. Each morning she awoke to the smell of wood smoke, the soft chatter of women preparing food, and the laughter of children running barefoot through the dust. The camp was nothing like the frightening stories she had heard growing up. It felt alive, warm, and full of its own rhythm. Yet Clara carried a heaviness inside her that did not leave. Everywhere she went, curious eyes followed her. Some people watched her with patience, others with caution, and a few with open dislike. She tried to stay close to Tariko's lodge, where she felt safest. He did not hover over her, but he watched her from a distance. Always alert, always aware of her presence. Clara found comfort in that quiet protection, even if she did not fully understand it. One morning an older woman approached her. Her name was Naha, and she moved with the calm confidence of someone respected in the tribe. Naha handed Clara a wooden bowl of stew. "Eat," she said kindly. "You need strength." Clara accepted the bowl with a grateful smile, feeling warmth spread through her chest at the woman's gentle tone. After that, Naha guided her through small tasks. Clara learned how to grind corn, how to braid rope, and how to prepare hides. The work kept her hands busy, but her mind wandered constantly, each time she paused. She found herself staring toward the hills, imagining her family searching, crying, hoping. The guilt felt sharp, like a constant pulling inside her. Tariko noticed one evening, as the sky turned orange with the setting sun, he walked toward her with steady steps. "You think of home?" he said quietly. Clara nodded, her throat tightening. "They don't know I'm alive," she whispered. "They must be terrified." Tariko stood beside her in silence. The fire crackled softly at their feet, sending sparks upward. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with something that felt like sadness. "You miss them," he said. "Yes," Clara answered. "Every minute." Tariko's jaw tightened slightly. "You will see them again," he said. Clara looked up, startled. "Will you take me back?" she asked, her voice trembling with hope. Tariko hesitated, and in that small pause, Clara felt fear slip back into her chest. "It is not simple," he said slowly. Clara's heart sank. "Why not?" she whispered. Tariko pointed toward the ridge in the distance. "Men still watch," he said. "Outlaws, and others who want trouble." Clara felt her breath catch. "So if I return now, they could." "Follow," she said. Tariko nodded. "Your family is not safe yet," he added. Clara hugged her arms around herself. The world felt too big, too dangerous, and she felt too small to understand it. Then what am I supposed to do? She asked in a shaking voice. Tariko looked at her with an expression she had never seen from him before. "It's something soft, something almost pained. You choose," he said gently. "Choose what?" she whispered, confused. "Your path." Tariko answered, "Stay here until it is safe, or leave soon, even with danger." Clara stared at him, her heart pounding. "You would let me choose?" she asked. Surprised, Tariko nodded without hesitation. "You are not prisoner," he said. "You are under my protection, not my command." Those words struck her deeply. She had been raised to believe his people were her people's enemies, yet here he stood, offering her freedom instead of control. She looked around at the camp, at the peaceful fires, the families, the gentle hum of life, and she realized she had begun to feel something she did not expect. Connection. That night, Clara lay awake. The moon hung low over the camp, casting silver light on the ground. She thought of her mother's hands, her father's tired smile, the warm smell of the cabin. But she also thought of Tariko's steady eyes, his courage, the way he risked himself to save her. She felt torn between two worlds that seemed shaped by different kinds of love. By morning her decision had not come. Her heart felt pulled in two directions. Each one painful in its own way. She stepped outside and found Tariko waiting near the fire. He looked at her as if he already knew the struggle she carried. "You speak your choice when your heart knows," he said. Clara nodded slowly. "I don't know yet." She whispered Tariko did not push her. He only said, "Two worlds wait for you. Clara, one of them you were born to, the other you walked into." Clara looked toward the rising sun. The light warmed her face, but her heart still shivered. She knew her decision would change everything, not just for her, but for her family, for the camp, and for the man who had saved her life. And as her thoughts tangled together, one truth echoed quietly in her mind. No matter which world she chose, she would lose something precious and gain something she did not expect. Her destiny now rested somewhere between two worlds, and soon she would have to step toward one of them, knowing the other might fade forever. Clara spent the next morning walking through the Comanche camp with a quiet, thoughtful heaviness in her steps. Children ran past her, laughing as they chased each other through the dust. Women worked by the fires, shaping dough, washing hides, speaking softly in their melodic tongue. Men tended horses or sat sharpening arrows. Their expressions calm but alert, the camp moved in a rhythm that felt ancient and steady, and Clara felt it pressing gently into her heart. But her thoughts drifted again and again to her family. She imagined her mother's worried face, her father's tight jaw, the empty chair at their small wooden table. She imagined them searching the woods, calling her name, praying she was alive. The weight of that image ached deep inside her. How could she stay here while they suffered? Yet when she looked at the camp, she saw something she had not known she needed. A place where people looked out for one another, a place built on honor and strength. And when she looked at Tariko, she felt something even more confusing settle in her chest. He had risked everything to save her. He had given her safety when she had none. He had offered her freedom when he had every reason not to. That afternoon, Naha approached her again. The older woman studied Clara with wise, searching eyes, then gently took her hand. "You think too much," Naha murmured. "Your heart is loud," Clara managed a small, sad smile. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. Naha squeezed her hand. "Your heart knows," she said. "Your feet must follow." As the sun dipped lower, Tariko walked toward her. His shadow stretched long behind him, blending with the dust. "You are ready," he said quietly. Not asking, but knowing, Clara inhaled sharply, feeling her pulse drum in her ears. "Yes," she whispered, though the word came out fragile. Tariko nodded once and led her away from the camp. They walked up a narrow trail that climbed a low hill overlooking the plains. From there, Clara could see the entire world stretched out around them. Golden grass waving, mountains darkening in the distance. A quiet breeze brushing her hair. Tariko stood beside her. "As still as a stone carved by time, tell me," he said softly, "where your path goes?" Clara swallowed hard. She closed her eyes for a moment and let all the noise fade. Fear, confusion, guilt, longing. What remained was one fragile truth. "My family," she whispered. "I need to see them. I need them to know I am alive." Tariko's jaw tightened. But he did not look away. He nodded slowly, a gesture that carried both acceptance and pain. "You return," he said. "Yes," Clara whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "But I don't want to leave with hate," she added. Her voice trembling, Tariko turned to her fully. His dark eyes steady and searching. "You leave with honor," he said. "And you leave with my protection." Clara felt her breath shake. Will I see you again?" she asked, barely able to speak the words. Tariko hesitated for the first time. The world seemed to pause with him. "Paths cross when spirits call them," he said quietly. "I do not choose for your heart, Clara, but I will not turn away if you return." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. Not from fear, but from the weight of a connection she never expected to feel. A connection born in danger, in silence, in the quiet way he had said her name. Tariko guided her down the hill and toward the camp's edge. A young warrior handed him a horse already saddled for the journey. Tarako helped Clara mount, his hands steady on her waist, lingering just long enough for her to feel warmth spread through her chest. He took the reins and began leading the horse toward the forest. Neither spoke. But the silence between them felt full of words unspoken and emotions too new to name. When they reached the cover of trees, Tarako placed a hand on the horse's side. "You ride to the ridge?" he said. "Your settlement is below." Clara nodded. Wiping her eyes, "Thank you," she whispered, the words too small for what he had done for her. Tarako stepped back, but his gaze stayed on her. "The meadow remembers you," he said quietly. "And so do I." Clara felt something break inside her, something tender and painful and beautiful. She gripped the reins and urged the horse forward as she rode toward her home. She kept looking back until Tarako's figure disappeared between the trees. Her heart felt torn, pulled by two worlds. Two futures, two truths. When she reached the ridge, she saw her settlement below. Smoke rose from chimneys. Children played near the stream, and the familiar outline of her cabin waited like a memory she had been holding too tightly. Clara let out a shaky breath. She was home. But she was not the same girl who had been taken. She was someone who had learned courage, resilience, and a kind of unexpected love. Her family rushed toward her as she rode down the hill. Shouting her name through tears, Clara fell into their arms, her heart overflowing with relief and gratitude. She was where she belonged, yet deep inside, she knew another truth. Her destiny was no longer shaped by just one world. It lived in the space between two, and someday. When the wind carried her footsteps back to the meadow, she knew one man would be waiting, the man who had changed everything. Asterisk.